Trump says he would entertain now a bipartisan bill with some kind of down payment on the wall. Democrats say that's not going to happen. And then this is why we are seeing, if not a cave, what some are calling tonight a semi-cave, because Trump now leaving the door open anew to supporting something that he calls a reasonable agreement.
Would you also reopen the temporary spending without money for the wall? Would you just to reopen the...
Well, I wouldn't be happy with it. If they come to a reasonable agreement, I would support it. I have other alternatives if I have to.
Let's get right to it. Senator Mazie Hirono has joined us, and you jumped in early up on the show, as we say, because of the developing news, because of not only the votes, but the president saying there, well, maybe something reasonable if both sides agree without wall funding. You know this much better than I do, Senator, but if I remember correctly, that is what you all achieved on a bipartisan basis, and he said no last time and shut the government down. Do you view the president tonight as tiptoeing back towards the opening deal you all gave him?
We've seen this play before. You know, when we were talking about DACA, he said, bring me a reasonable compromise, bipartisan, I'll sign it. And he didn't. And then, of course, the other reasonable thing, just as you mentioned, was the vote that we took to keep government running in December. And then he gets yelled at by some people on Fox News, and suddenly he reneges. So, you know, the president is what I would call a person who changes his mind at a drop of the hat, and whatever he considers reasonable is very changeable. So my thinking is, Ari, that as we voted on these two bills, one of which was the Trump bogus offer, should have been voted down, but I'm glad that 6 Republicans voted on. And this isn't really the Democratic bill. It was the bill to keep government running that we all voted for in December. Wow, 6 courageous Republicans said, yeah, we're going to maintain our consistency.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing there, which is bringing some nuance to sort of fact check the way we talk about these things in shorthand. I believe what you're helping us get into is the fact that original thing wasn't, as you say, just quote unquote Democrat. That was a thing to fund the government by compromise. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. It already represented a compromise, and in fact, notice who's running the Senate. It's a Republican, so obviously that was a Republican-sponsored bill that we all voted for in December to keep government running. Now, my hope was that with the failure of these two bills, that it set the stage and an environment for a bipartisan effort to come up with a compromise, which apparently the president already shot down. But I think that these discussions should continue, because what it points out to me, Ari, is that you can't talk sense to someone who makes no sense. That would be the president. And therefore, Congress should do its job. We are a separate branch of government, and I've been calling on Mitch McConnell to step up and not continue to be in hiding or kowtowing to the president's whims by just bringing forth the president's bill. So, you know, I think that we should vote on whatever compromise that can be achieved by the folks who are meeting to do that. And of course, that has to include Speaker Pelosi. And then we pass these bills, and then it goes to the president, and if he vetoes it, then we have the option of doing a veto override at that point.
You're speaking to how the Senate, as a co-equal branch, can put the pressure on. We talked a little bit about Trump. You're saying he's not so reasonable. I want to get your views as well on how we can understand.
It's on Mitch.
What'd you say?
It's on Mitch.
It's on
Mitch McConnell to do his job.
So let's get into that part before I know you're busy, before I let you go, and we're going to get into a lot of this Michael Cohen news in a couple of moments for our viewers. But before we turn to that, I want to play a little more sound from the Senate today, and I want you to walk us through what it means, because from a distance, people say, well, okay, it seems like maybe nothing's happening. But what we just put up on the screen, what you're speaking to, what I'm about to play, suggests the temperature is rising, and it is moving, maybe one at a time, but moving some Republicans, some in the president's party. Here was Senator Bennett today.
How ludicrous it is that this government is shut down over a promise the President of the United States couldn't keep. This is a joke. This government should be open. We can debate whatever it is we want to debate.
What is the heat we're seeing inside the Senate, and is it getting to some of these Republicans that could actually, as you say, put real pressure with a bill on the president's desk?
I think most of us live in the real world where People need their paychecks to pay their bills and keep a roof over their heads, food on the table. That's where most people live, but obviously not our Commerce Secretary, who said, why can't they just go out and get a loan? Or, this administration has an unlimited capacity in their lack of empathy. So the president is not somebody we can negotiate with, because for one, he's a hostage-taking, amoral person who makes no distinction between right or wrong. So I think that the compromise must be forged at the legislative level, that's congressional, and we should pass these bills to get the government running, and then we can have all kinds of discussions about border security, which we all support, by the way, and the other things that the president wants. And I think the reason that he took hostages is he cannot make a valid argument for a multi-billion-dollar wall, because the 5.7 billion is only a down payment. He can't justify that wall on its own, on its merit. So he has to take 800,000 people and contractors hostage. That's who we are dealing with in the President of the United States.
Yeah.
An amoral, lying person whose mind is changed at the whim. And I guess if Ann Coulter yells at him, he turns into a total wimp.
Well, it sounds like you're saying that Donald Trump is stuck between Ann Coulter and Nancy Pelosi. Folks can figure out what that means, but he seems to be moving towards Pelosi. Senator, thank you for joining
Congress
us.
can do its job.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.